All right, and welcome back. Today we are talking with Victoria Grace Elliott, who has a new graphic novel out entitled "Yummy: A History of Desserts." It's um, it's very interesting. I've been reading through it the past couple of nights, and I'm glad to finally have a chance to sit down and talk with Victoria about her book. So let me just bring her in, and we'll find out more about her and her book. How's it going?
Hey, hi Chad. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for taking the time to you know talk about your graphic novel. Now, I want to say that this isn't the first like graphic novel I've read where it's like a history of something. A couple of years ago, I knew a couple of guys who did one called "The History of Beer." So, and this reminds me very much like that one. And I love that one. And I'm like I said, I'm still reading this one. I try to read a chapter a night, so I'm getting started on. I think I have to get started on the donut section now. So
Oh,
I'm gonna.
perfect.
I'm gonna.
Donut's a fun chapter.
I. The book makes me hungry. Okay.
No, I know it's a problem. Can you imagine me working on it? Like I was needing to go out and buy sweet treats at any special occasion.
So tell us a little bit before we get talking about the book. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a cartoonist. How long have you been cartooning, and kind of what inspired you to do that?
Well, honestly, I feel like I've been cartooning my whole life. I think I started like actually getting paid for it when I was at the University of Texas. I joined the Daily Texan Comic staff, which is the student newspaper there. And some of the alumni include like Chris Ware and Robert Rodriguez. So I was like super excited to like join the comic staff. And that was sort of like when I started in a real professional capacity. And then, and it was a student newspaper, so I wasn't getting paid that much. After graduation, it was more just like stuff I did in my free time. That was the like big boom of web comics. So I started a web comic right when I graduated, and I worked on that for I think it was around like 7 or 8 years. And then yeah, like I worked at an animation studio for about 4 years, two as an office manager and two as an artist in pre-production,
Mhm.
where I got a lot of really professional skills that I needed. And then it was after that that I sort of felt comfortable like doing comics full time and like trying to pitch books and things like that. And that's sort of when Yummy came to be.
So, other than the fact that everybody likes to eat desserts, what inspired you to, you know, do, take this topic and really flesh it out?
Oh yeah, totally. I think I had a lot of background already doing sort of like baked goods history research, because the webcomic that I mentioned earlier, it was one of the main characters was a witch who wanted to bake without magic. And it was kind of like pre-industrialization, so it was like, well, I need to learn how to like how would you bake bread in like a stone oven with only wood? Like how would you know when it's hot enough? That kind of thing. So I was doing a lot of research already to try to figure out like, I love watching the process of food being made and in comics and TV and movies and anything like that. So I wanted to depict it as well, but that also meant I had to know how to do it. So I had to do the research to sort of figure out how to show it and how to show this character doing all this stuff. And
Okay.
fun enough, I did a side comic and it featured the history of macarons. And that's actually what became the macaron chapter, which is the last chapter in the book.
And so, um, for your style of art and writing, do you have people who have influenced you, as you've grown as a creator?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a lot of incredible peers who I think have helped out a lot. And in terms of just like influences, I'm very clearly inspired by manga and anime. So a lot of what went
Hmm.
into Yummy was inspiration from Clamp and Naoko Takeuchi, who did Sailor Moon. Like I definitely wanted to bring a very magical girl vibe to this, so there's a lot of that in this. Yeah, and then there's comics. Unfortunately, I don't know the name of the creator for this one, but there was a comic called Wakako Zake, and it's about this like 26-year-old woman who's an office worker, and she like goes out and drinks and eats, and every chapter is just about food that she's eating that night, and it sort of tells you the cultural context of it or how it's made or, whatever. But it's like very lighthearted and very fun. And that was something that I got like really into. There's a live action version of it. And I got really into watching that like in the probably the 4 years before starting Yummy.
Also, so this uh, obviously has taken you a while to put together, Yummy, the graphic novel itself.
I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you repeat that?
I was saying, I was said, you said it. Did I hear you right? That you said you have started working on this 4 years ago.
It wasn't necessarily 4 years ago. How long ago was it now? I guess it was probably the end of 2018 was when it was first coming into being. So I guess more like 3 years ago. So yeah, it was a bit. Really, how it came to be was I had had all this like background, right, and like doing research. I had a little bit of a background in academia, so I was comfortable doing research and writing essays and things like that. And then also love of comics and food. But really, what happened is when I was ready to transition to making graphic novels full time, Gina Gagliano, who started the Random House Graphic imprint where this was made, she reached out to me right when she was starting it up. And she was like, "Hey, I'd really like to see a pitch from you." So I was scrambling. I was like, I don't know what to pitch. I don't have a good idea, but I really want to do this and I really want to take the shot. I had a agent at the time, Steven Salpeter, and fortunately he was friendly with Gina. And I think it was during like an ice cream meetup that they had where they went to like an ice cream parlor and had ice cream, very on brand. But Gina was like, I would love to see a book about the history of food, like food history. And I think she threw out pizza and ice cream as a couple of the suggestions. And so I clearly latched on to ice cream and just ran with it. So it was like, okay, it'll be a dessert book. It'll have these characters, like what desserts do I want to talk about? And then it sort of just coalesced from there.
So let's go ahead and jump into the book. Can you give me kind of like a summary of the book, and who the characters are that guides the reader through the book?
Yeah, so there's three food sprites who sort of they love food history and they introduce you to everything. You've got Perry, Fee, and Fada, who sort of have different specialties as they're walking you through the history. So Perry really, really loves, she's got like her little conspiracy boards for each chapter of like the research she's done. And she wants to sort of discover this with you, the reader. She's not like an authority, she's just somebody who's really excited about this stuff. And she really loves story time. So she loves legends of things that may or may not be true, but have an interesting cultural context and talk about like what people like to talk about when they talk about food or like the stories they like to share. And then you've got Fee, and she's a little bit shy at first, but she sort of gets more comfortable as it goes on. But she likes to research and play as certain historical figures. So Perry and Fee usually sit down for something called the interview corner, where Fee is essentially in like cosplay or something like that of different historical figures. So Perry and Fee can actually have a conversation about with whoever that is. And then Fada, his specialty is the science. So in terms of the ice cream chapter, which is the first chapter in the book, you sort of learn about the salt ice technique of how ice gets colder. And that's part of what helps freeze the cream in the churning process, which is one of the
Yeah,
classic ways to make ice cream.
yeah. When I was reading that part of the book, I was thinking about my mother-in-law got my son this one of those balls you put the ice in one end and the cream and stuff in the other, and you roll it back and forth, and then you have the ice cream.
Oh, that sounds so tasty.
So we've done that a couple times, and that was that's a fun thing to do with him. But yeah, did when you were looking, let me stop. You have so many elements. You have not only you have the legends that you put out there, plus you have the science. Then you have just the baking stuff in general. Did you have to go to certain people to help find a way to maybe explain that in a way that it was simple or could be done visually?
I did do, like, a lot of internet research. Unfortunately, I didn't, like, really get the opportunity. I did think about, like, talking with actual bakers and stuff like that, but I just didn't get the opportunity to do it. And then I think, like, part of this book was made during quarantine, unfortunately, so it was like, if, I wanted to do it before, it was a little bit too late at that point.
Mhm.
Um, but a lot of it I did myself. Like, so just in terms of making the recipes at the end of certain chapters, like I had to do a lot of trial and error for those. Like I think the snickerdoodle was the one where I'd like baked a lot of snickerdoodle cookies to try and get the recipe right.
So, how did you go about like you tracking down the different legends? Because I know that in the brownie, the like it's kind of like a shorter section on the brownie. You tell about the two legends about the origin of the brownie. Did you have to kind of dig deeper for stuff like that, or was that?
It was pretty on the surface actually, because it was like as soon as I was doing research, there would be, of course, there'd just be like, oh, people say, like, I think a lot of it came from like encyclopedic research. And even that, it would be like they'd have references to these legends. And so I actually sort of like flagged them. That's sort of where I got the idea to start doing the legends at all, because I was like,
Mhm.
well, you know what? This is a fun story to tell, but like I do definitely want to like clarify within the book that this isn't necessarily true, but I think it's still like fun to have that kind of stuff, especially in a book for kids, and also sort of teach kids how to look at history in that way and how to sort of like, okay, is this a really easy story that we're telling, or is this just like a little too convenient? Like, because, oh, a mistake happened and suddenly this thing was made. I think a lot more people are like, when they're making desserts, are a lot more intentional than that. So I think things sort of actually happen on purpose a lot more, but it's so fun to talk about like the little accidents and the cultural crossovers and stuff like that that happen. So they were actually pretty easy to find, and it was usually just they sort of guided. It was more like the research guided what story times I had, and the fact that story time existed at all.
And yeah, I kind of enjoyed those little parts of the each chapter, especially like the one about the waffle cone and the World's Fair, and it's set up, and the book is set up in such a way that you're learning something, but there's also breaks for you to kind of think about what you just read, but then there's also entertainment to keep you kind of involved in the book. So you did a great job, the way you've set it up.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was very on purpose. I didn't want it to be like just reading a Wikipedia page or something. So yeah, I did try to think a lot about how I could add those different sections of humor or character that would make it more interesting.
Now, was there something that you learned during your research that you didn't know that kind of surprised you, or what was the probably the thing that I guess that you found out during this book that kind of struck you as the most interesting?
I think a lot of like there were probably two things that I think stuck out to me the most. So when I first was doing the research for ice cream, like even when pitching the book, I think really trying to find out how people stored ice and made ice was really fascinating.
Hmm.
So it's like the Persian yakchal that I talk about pretty early on was like one of my favorite details, just in terms of like the cleverness and the science that people had to sort of do just because they wanted something like cold to have in the summer, right?
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting. The other most interesting thing I think was actually learning that sugar is like nowhere indigenous to Europe. I think that was just something I'd always taken for granted, like the actual sugarcane plant. And that things prior to a certain era were just sweetened with honey and like trying to figure out like, wait, how do they sweeten things? Like, how far back do sweets go here, and that kind of thing.
So along with the graphic novel, you do a web comic.
It's unfortunately no longer going, but yeah, I did do a
Oh,
web
okay.
comic, right. Yeah, it was called Balderdash, A Tale of Two Witches, and it's still up, so you can read, part of the story, but unfortunately, it's not completed.
Uh, so did you learn anything or take anything from your time doing that you were able to apply to making the graphic novel? I guess I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, no, like working on the webcomic, I feel like it was a direct line because I think that's actually how Gina like knew of me. Because I was promoting it at conventions and things like that. And Gina, was really good about going out and buying mini comics and stuff like that, seeing sort of like, who's in the zeitgeist. And that's part of why she reached out to me, I'm sure. And I think that's also part of why that conversation between her and Stephen went the route of food history, because I was already doing a lot of that stuff. I mean, even within the web comic, at the ends of chapters, I was like, oh, I would really like to have a recipe. I don't know even where I got this idea, but I was like, I want a recipe at the end of the chapters. And so that's
Hmm.
actually where the idea came from, to have that in Yummy. So it was pretty like, one of them's fiction and fantasy, and then the other one's nonfiction and more like these characters telling you history. But I feel like it's a pretty straight line between the two.
Hmm. And did you have to maybe change your writing style or anything like that to kind of make it flow, differently? Or
Oh yeah, no, that's an interesting question because the one of the things I really decided early on with Yummy is that I wanted to have breakout panels where Perry's just like standing in front of a dessert and you get like these huge speech bubbles full of information about it with the banner on the top. Like that is something in fiction I would never do, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of like lots of dialogue in one speech bubble. I like to break it up a lot more. So it was
Mhm.
sort of a weird adjustment, but I was like, this is the best way to do it because, I feel like I'm sort of doing kind of a book with an illustration vibe here, and I could still break it up with a lot more of the like shorter dialogue and quippier moments and silliness that I like. But when I'm actually conveying information, it's like, yeah, you do need to read this. Like Perry does need to say all of this. And this is the way I think to make it the most visually engaging. And yeah, that was definitely a purposeful choice working on Yummy versus working on fiction because it was like you can't really do that in fiction, I think, as or at least it might not be as compelling, but in this it sort of necessitated it.
Mhm. Now, was there, something that you found doing your research that, you or a dessert or something that you wanted to include in the book, but for, some reason or not, just didn't have the space or the time?
Yes, unfortunately, there's like quite a few. So two in particular were gelatin and gooey butter cake. Gooey butter cake is I have a lot of family in St. Louis, which is part of the reason why I mentioned the St. Louis World's Fair when I do, but also gooey butter cake is like from that area and I've always loved it, but I just did not have space in this book to talk about it. Another favorite is Japanese style strawberry shortcake. And I
Hmm.
even had like a cute idea for a legend of because it had an interesting backstory, but there was just no space for that either. I mean, the cake chapter is pretty hefty in and of itself, so
Yeah.
it just got on the cutting room floor.
Now, which of the desserts was your favorite to, write about? Or
I feel like in terms of the research, ice cream was probably the most interesting, but I think in terms of like actually drawing it and like drawing the characters, I feel like probably the donut chapter
Mhm.
because the donut chapter is really like just a joyride. Because it's like I sort of reframe it as in like it's not specifically the history of just spoilers. I'm sorry, I know you haven't read it yet. It's not just like donuts with a hole, but like any sweetened fried dough, and
Mhm.
because every culture, like almost every culture on the planet loves sweetened fried dough and has found a way to do it. Like it's just sort of like a greatest hits of different kinds of that throughout the history of the world and like different cultures.
Mhm. So, you know, if you have, are you working on maybe a follow up or something to this, or are you just going to kind of let this, sit out there, and see where it goes, and then, maybe work on something else?
Well, fortunately, Random House did actually buy a second Yummy book, so I'm working on it right now. It's almost finished, but it won't be out till 2023. This one's called Yummy: A History of Tasty Experiments,
Mm.
and stuff like gelatin and gooey butter cake. I actually got to talk about it in that. It's a lot more about foods that are kind of like make you wonder why somebody did that to begin with. So cheese and pickles are in there, and then a lot of packaged food is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like soda, gelatin, and pizza. I was able to get to pizza too in that one.
Like I said, I really enjoyed the book because one of the things that we've been binging, through our streaming has been like the baking shows and stuff like that. So this was a kind of a nice compliment to that, that side also.
I'm so glad. I feel like a lot of people like really double down on like just watching shows about food or like watching like food making videos during quarantine, especially. So yeah,
Yeah, my older brother got into the whole sourdough thing, so
I'm too scared of sourdough because it's like I mean, it's like a living thing you have to deal with, right? Like the sourdough mother or whatever.
yeah, I don't know, but I do like bread.
Yes, I also love bread. Yeah, and if you get that sourdough, absolutely, that's a perk.
So where can people find your book when
It
it
should
releases on the
be
30th of November?
I believe it should be. I mean, it's at least online. I'm not sure what stores are actually going to have it. I know, like, if you're in town in Austin, I know Kinokuniya is going to have a bunch of copies. I'm not sure where the Silver Sprocket is, but I know they have it as well. You can pretty much order it online at most major retailers, so anywhere from Amazon to Target to Barnes and Noble. But you can also, if you go to the Penguin Random House website and look for Yummy, you can order it. You can find local bookstores that you can order it from too. So I always suggest supporting your local comic book store when you can. So that's a
Definitely.
good place to go and just like find your local store and ask them to order it for you.
Now, are you reading any comics yourself that you would recommend?
Oh, that's a great question.
They can be, you know regular comics, web comics.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I would definitely I read a lot of webtoons these days. That's most of what I keep up with. I just finished BL Metamorphosis, which I believe is through Yen Press or Seven Seasons. I can't remember which, but I really love BL Metamorphosis. That one's really, really lovely. On point with everything, I've been reading. My friend gifted me the whole series of What Did You Eat Yesterday? And that one, every chapter is literally about a different like meal that this one man makes for his partner, and that one's really lovely. I definitely recommend that. And then in terms of on the Webtoon app, I've also been reading After School Lessons for Unripe Apples. That's probably it does not involve food as much as What Did You Eat Yesterday, as much as the title might suggest, but it's very good. Like a throwback 2000s comic about this school kid who's very, very bad at studying and has like this contentious relationship with her neighbor that's very funny.
Nice. So, is there anything else that maybe we didn't cover that you wanted to mention about the book?
I feel like we covered a lot of ground, I feel like, so I'm pretty happy.
All right. So, why don't as we wrap up here, how about you kind of give a pitch about the book and where people can find you on the social media if you're there.
Oh, sorry, I'm like trying to think about the pitch for the book. Um, so if you love desserts, you will definitely love this book. It will leave you hungry because I've done my best to draw these desserts as beautifully as possible.
I gained ten
These cute.
pounds.
Hey, that sounds like a recommendation to me.
It is. You can use that
But
as a pull quote.
So yes, this book is for people who love desserts and love the history of desserts, who like to see desserts being made and just want to talk about their favorite desserts with their friends and these cute little sprites who will guide you through the history. You can find me online at Friday afternoon, both on Twitter and Instagram. And if you are on TikTok, I have a few videos up there for behind the scenes on Yummy at Yummy History.
Very nice. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk this afternoon. And when Yummy 2 comes out, or Yummier, I don't know, just throwing it out there. Yeah, I'd love to have you back so we can talk about, the that book and, what went into doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Thank you for having me on today.
All right. Are you doing any shows, or you just kind of still kind of playing it safe, or?
Yeah, I'm definitely playing it safe for now. I think I feel like next year I might try for something, just especially because
Yeah.
I have the author copies right now, but I honestly don't know what, so
No,
I'll have to wait and
it's just
see.
curious. Yeah. I know
Yeah.
that's a feeling I've gotten from a lot of people I've talked to, and I understand too. I haven't been going to shows either, so.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's what, like two whole years without shows is such a weird feeling.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much for taking the time this today, and stay safe, stay healthy, and everybody should go buy the book and maybe a dozen donuts, a cake, and some brownies. I don't know.
Yes,
Just
absolutely.
all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.